सुनो 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 मेरी आवाज, सुनो सुनो नया ये सांस, मुझे पंख मिले हैं आज, मुझे लेनी है एक परवाज़, मुझे पंख मिले हैं आज, मुझे लेनी है एक परवाज़। सुनो सुनो है सुनो सुनो, मुझसे मिले ये जहां, मुझसे है तेरी ये शान, मुझसे मिले है भक्ति, मैं ही हूँ तेरी शक्ति। सुनो 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 मेरी आवाज, सुनो सुनो नया ये सांस, मुझे पंख मिले हैं आज, मुझे लेनी है एक परवाज़। सुनो सुनो है सुनो सुनो। That was Suno Suno Meri Awaaz, which happens to be the favorite song of my next guest, Sarika Bhakta. Sarika is a certified diversity executive and is the president of Nikeya Diversity Consulting based out of Iowa in the US. Sarika and I are now going to be having a conversation around how diversity is so important for technology companies that are looking to grow in the US. So listen in to this conversation. I have with me today Sarika Bhakta, who is a certified diversity executive and is the president of Nikeya Diversity Consulting based in Iowa in the US. And Sarika and I are going to be talking about a very relevant topic, which is diversity in technology companies. And this is really relevant because there are lots of tech companies from around the world who are looking to enter the US and who are looking to build organizations in the US. But I think so, Sarika, I think we have clearly passed the discussion on why DEI, because I think there's enough research which has shown that diversity in business leads to greater innovation, customer service, employee engagement, long-term growth, and sort of what have you. But I think there are still, several moving parts, right? And I thought it might be a great forum for us to have that conversation. So, for instance, it's a known fact that the demographics of the workforce is changing, right? It's changing in the US, it's changing in various other parts of the country. And so I would assume that DEI would happen organically, right? And a lot of companies, therefore, would become more and more DEI oriented over a period of time because that's the way the workforce is actually changing. But do you feel that there should be a sense of urgency? I mean, I know there is research which backs the fact that DEI works beautifully and things of that kind, but is there a sense of urgency? And what do you think is a good path to DEI adoption?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here, especially talking about such a important and vital business imperative in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement. So you'll hear me say DEIE, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement, because I look at all of those four moving pieces. And you asked me if there's a sense of urgency. Absolutely. Why? Because we have seen data over decades in terms of globally, as well as here domestically, that when it comes to engagement, it's low engagement that people are feeling. And then we threw in a pandemic, and then you throw in the natural disasters, throw in the man-made disasters. Guess what? People's engagement is very low. And it has an impact on their mental health and their physical well-being, which has a ripple effect in terms of how they show up and do business in the IT, wherever you may be, in the India, around the world, US. So that's why it is a sense of urgency. When I talk to business leaders, there are two things that are top of mind for them: workforce and healthcare. I don't care what part of the country or part of the world you're at, workforce, healthcare.
Yes.
So there is a sense of urgency around diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement.
Yeah, so I would agree that there is definitely an urgency around engagement, right? And perhaps equity. But I'm just trying to figure out the entire diversity conversation,
Yes, so
right?
let's peel back the onion a little bit more.
Right,
That when you are looking in today's global economy, changing demographics is a key driver of diversity, which you hit it on
right,
the nail earlier. The
right.
other is technology, which I'm sure your members can appreciate, your
Yeah,
clients can
yeah,
appreciate.
yeah,
That means that our borders no longer are concrete borders. That means you have opportunity to tap into the workforce around the world and a
yeah.
marketplace around the world.
Right.
And the pandemic was a catalyst where technology was increased
Right.
drastically.
Yeah,
So the urgency with having a workforce that mirrors a global workforce,
yeah.
because our backyards are globalized more
Sure.
and more and more. And
Right.
if you want to be able to be relevant in today's global economy, you need to have a workforce that's going to be representative in the markets that you serve. And it's so important. So if you're thinking about, you said that you have a lot of clients and companies that are trying to tap into the US market, I would
Yes.
start there. Look at the
Yeah.
demographics of
Yeah.
the market that you want to penetrate, that you
Yeah.
want to enter.
Yeah.
What are the demographics?
Yeah.
That in of itself, I always say at a minimum, your current workforce needs to mirror the markets that you want to tap into at a minimum. And that
Yeah.
wouldn't stop there, Thomas. What I would say is look 5, 10, 20 years. What are the demographics going to show you?
Yeah.
Because US is increasingly diversifying. That also means that you have to look 5, 10 years down the road and see what the demographics are going to be. That is what I would aspire your workforce to be
Yeah.
as you're tapping into the market there.
No, I think that's very interesting that you say that. But I just had a thought that I just wanted to leave behind, which is that, given the economic downturn and all that which is happening, I think a lot of organizations also have a very short-term focus. I mean, they have to fix things for today. So, which therefore means that when they're hiring, they're really looking for the right fit of talent, right? And in the bargain, are they able to get diverse talent? I'm not too sure. Now, perhaps recruitment agencies which are helping them in this process, have access to some diverse talent. But a lot of organizations probably feel that, look, I need the right person for the right job so that I can get a quick result. Given the fact that we are going through an economic, slowdown, right? So there are some, counter challenges of that kind as well, in the actual marketplace, which is actually happening.
Yeah, so to your point there, when you're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement,
Yeah,
it is a long game. It's
yeah,
meant to be a long game because it's supposed to be a non-ending game. And so
right,
you need to be thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement to your clients and your
right,
customers really need to be looking at it. What am I looking from a cultural transformation where you're embedding diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement into the
right,
DNA, the
yeah,
fabric of your organization,
right,
so that it does mean that you can't be looking at quick fixes. You look
yeah,
at quick fixes and then you're going to get some quick results that
yeah,
in the long term is not going to pan out. We've already seen that over time with the multi generations in the workplace.
yeah,
What is the retention looking like? How long are they staying in the workforce? My
right,
husband has been in the workforce for 20 some years at the same company. Okay.
right,
He's someone that people are like, well, how can we get that? Well, guess
yeah,
what? You're not going to see people staying at a company for that long term. What you
yeah,
may be seeing is those boomerang hires. So what do I
right,
mean by that, Thomas? Is that
yeah,
you get client in the door, you get a, talent into the door.
yeah,
They may be here for a little bit, but then they're going to look at other opportunity. They may have
yeah,
to move for whatever reason. You are hoping, and you can bank on the fact that if you have a culture that values people's diversity,
right,
creates an equitable environment. What I mean by equity is, are you creating a fair environment? That's what
yeah,
equity means. And then are you creating environments where they are feeling included? If you do, then
yeah,
that individual is feeling engaged. They have a sense of belonging that
yeah,
even if they have to leave your company, guess what? They will leave, but if they need to come back and they
yeah,
have to look for another transitions, they're going to be thinking about your company. Why did I leave? I need to go back. So your boomerang hires are
right.
increasingly happening in today's market as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just another observation, Sarika. I was talking to the CEO of a logistics company out of India, and he has been pitching in recent times for some contracts with corporations outside of India, largely are based out of the US, who have some business in India as well. And as part of the request for information, they actually have been asking him questions around diversity in his organization. And he was totally stumped. And he met me the other day and he said, "Hey, Thomas, look, these are all new questions that are coming up, and which is making me realize that, look, I need to start thinking about it." So, therefore, the question also is that, what's happening in the developed markets. And because, as you rightly said, they're a global economy and everybody is sort of interdependent, there is a lot of pressure on, in countries where perhaps there is still some lip service being done to that. And therefore, these organizations are under, tremendous pressure. And therefore, my thought also is that perhaps the changing environment is also putting pressure on companies around the world to make this change. So even if you do not, uh, perhaps you don't realize it, right? You're being made to realize that, look, this is actually happening.
Absolutely. You're seeing across the supply chain, wherever you
Yes.
may be in the pecking order,
Yes.
that you're having some other partner or another vendor or
Yeah.
another, strategic contractor that is reaching out to you as a subcontractor and saying, these are our parameters.
Right.
We value diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement.
Right.
Now, what are you doing inside your own walls? Because it has
Yeah.
a direct impact in terms of our own reporting structure back to our end client.
Right.
And whether you're looking at a for-profit, you're looking at a nonprofit with their funders,
Yes.
donors, everybody's asking. And the reason why, Thomas, is because we're
Yeah.
seeing a big importance now more than ever around
Yeah.
either corporate social responsibility
Yeah.
or ESG, which is your environmental social governance.
Right.
And because they're saying, as a big company, a leader in your community, in your state, in your country,
Yeah.
what are you doing around financial gains,
Yes.
social gains, environmental gains?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So I think moving on, Sarika, to the next, really thought that I have. Now, a lot of large IT companies based out of India and elsewhere are starting to look at DEI quite carefully because they have presence in the US, they have presence in Europe, so they need to start adapting quickly. Now, the challenge can come with the supervisory layer that they have, down the organization. Do they have the right skills to manage a diverse workforce? Because then what can happen is that, look, you might have a lot of diversity in the organization, but can it lead to challenges of inclusion and conflict and so on? So I think there is perhaps a lot of hand holding and training that these folks require because, I think it's really saying one thing that, look, I have diversity, but how do I ensure that it is successfully implemented in my organization?
Mhm. Great point there, Thomas. Skill set is number one. I conduct a lot of D&I cultural assessments for
Yeah.
organizations. Even before I go into training, I'm asking them, what is the appetite for change around DEIE?
Yeah.
And one thing that comes up top across all the assessments is skill set around, we don't know how to talk about diversity with our colleagues.
Right.
So creating an environment, safe space for people to be able to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and engagement is key, in
Right.
addition to be able to provide training that
Yeah.
allows them to build their cultural competency.
Yeah.
And diversity is just differences. I want to be very
Yeah.
clear when we talk about diversity that I know that sometimes people think that means race, ethnicity, and gender.
Yeah.
Diversity is differences. So you can look at
Yeah.
race,
Yeah.
ethnicity, gender,
Yeah.
religion, caste system,
Yeah.
geographic, education level, sexual
Right.
orientation, identity, veteran status, disability.
Yeah.
It is broad. And so
Yes.
how can you create an environment that you have diversity, and you're right, diversity in of itself is not the magic pill, because
Right.
that's only going to be diversity there. You need to
Right.
really create policies,
Yeah.
practices, and procedures. You
Yeah.
also need to have leadership at the top that is
Yes.
modeling the way, modeling the behavior. So what do I mean by that, Thomas?
Yeah. Yeah.
That means that at all levels of the organization, there should be diversity that is represented, both
Right.
visible and invisible diversity. And if leaders are not being able to be inclusive, It's
Yeah.
going to be hard for your managers, your frozen middle, I call them, because
Yeah.
usually they are the ones that are upholding the status quo.
Yeah.
So if they're not feeling empowered to really
Yes.
create a culture of questioning where people can
Yes.
ask questions, that means they can ask, why aren't we doing this process this way? Why can't we X, Y, and Z? That's
Right.
where innovation comes in. But if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't create a culture of questioning, that
Right.
means that your people aren't safe enough to question things. And when
Right.
you question things, it allows for innovation to
Yeah.
thrive and drive. And that's why it's so important to be able to
Yeah.
look at leadership commitment to DEIE. That means your
Yeah.
board, your shareholders, as well
Right.
as your senior executive team. And
Right.
then your managers need to
Yeah.
really be having the skill set to be able to inspire
Yeah.
diverse talent.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I actually like the term that you use, frozen middle. That was really interesting. And I have another example of frozen middle, which is that, when the pandemic started and, we had work from home and so on and so forth, I think the frozen middle struggled suddenly managing their teams because they were all used to having their teams around them, right? And then all these folks were scattered in India to tier three, tier four towns. Everybody went, left the main metro as well,
Mhm.
and the frozen middle actually struggled with it, and the companies were actually had no time to train them and skill them and so on because there was too many other concurrent challenges that were happening there. So yes, they would continue to have challenges around work from anywhere, a hybrid workforce, and now a lot of this diversity pressure as well. But I think yes, that's a big challenge, but I think there's a great opportunity for companies to be able to manage that, skill their employees, and become better enabled for becoming a global workforce.
Absolutely,
So,
Thomas. And I
yeah,
think that before you even get to developing the skill set, the
yeah,
organization really has to assess their own values, mission, and
right,
vision,
right,
and look at it in their overarching strategic plan.
right,
How much commitment are they
yeah,
giving and making
yeah,
DEIE a priority? If it's not in your overarching strategic plan and it's not
yes,
reflected in your values, mission, and
yes,
your vision, it's a
yeah,
lost cause. And I
yeah,
say
yeah,
that
correct,
because your infrastructure
yes,
and what people are seeing, what they're
yeah,
viewing in your annual reports, your
yeah,
websites, and
yeah,
what is the leadership saying about it. And it
yes,
can't be when something is happening because then
that's
it's
right,
going to be really reactive and it's going to sound very
right,
performative when you're
yeah,
throwing out statements X, Y, and Z because they're
right,
thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm going to your website and I don't see anything around your
yeah,
DEIE journey.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah,
is a journey. And that is where I think we're seeing a lot of the missed opportunities. And even if you do have statements and your website and your communications are reflecting it, then you
yeah,
have to look at what are the outcomes, what are the
right,
actions, what have you been
yes,
able to do?
sure,
Because then it shows that you are really driving journey in a very intentional,
yeah,
strategic, and
yeah.
proactive manner.
Right, absolutely. So now I want to move on to a very practical point, Sarika, which is that many of these companies that I advise and I see around me, tech startups, when they want to enter the U.S. market, they're looking at their first hire, and invariably it's a sales lead. And I've been talking to a lot of people in the U.S. These are Americans and so on and so forth, and they tell me that look, I think that your first hire in sales should be a Caucasian, American accent, and so on and so forth to be able to resonate. Make sure you don't hire an Indian, right? So, these are the kind of comments that I hear. So, I'm just trying to understand what is the dynamics now in the US market with enterprises who are looking to buy products and services from, startups from around the world. Are these constraints or have they gone past it? Are they themselves, if they are DEI oriented, then, what would be their thought process? So, it would really be interesting to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, great question, Thomas. And my philosophy is for any organization is when you're looking around your own DEIE, you have to look internally. And
Yeah,
so if you want to partner with a market, we talked about it, representation is important.
right,
You still want to be very strategic and intentional when it comes to your hiring.
right,
And when people say diversity hiring, so in your case,
right.
when they say, well, make sure that
Yeah,
you hire someone that's non-Indian, right?
yeah,
But I will go back to why is the organization doing it? If they have a formal strategic DEIE plan that is
Yeah.
showing intentionality, then it's easier to communicate the message. At the
Right.
end of the day, though, you are still going to hire qualified talent. The
Yes.
biggest thing is, casting a wider net so you have
Yes.
more in the candidate pool,
Right.
because you need to be able to do that. You're not lowering the bar. With that said, when it comes to opportunities in the US, a lot of organizations and companies have a supplier diversity program.
Right.
That means
Yeah.
is that companies are very intentional to look
Yeah.
at their own suppliers and vendors
Right.
that are extremely diverse, whether
Right.
they are minority owned, women owned, small business owned. They
Yes.
can fit into that category and help
Yeah.
elevate that company's DEIE strategies as well.
Right.
So there's multiple prongs that
Yeah.
anybody that wants to look into working
Right.
into the US market
Yeah.
can really go. But I would say be very, very intentional around your
Right.
DEI strategies and why
Right.
you are making that higher. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to diversify,
Right.
but do it for the right reason,
I
right?
understand. I understand. So finally, Sarika, I'm just trying to understand. I know we've discussed this at length, but any final thoughts around what should be the strategy that a startup, which is or a company, could even be a reasonably mature company looking to enter the US, what should be their short-term and long-term goals as far as organization building is concerned, keeping in mind the intentionality of DEI and being an effective organization.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I think we shared in length in terms of being very strategic and
Yeah,
intentional. Get your house in order first. And then when you
yeah,
start tapping into markets, you can say that we also are our own DEIE journey. This is how our partnership can elevate each other's journey.
yes,
When you work in tandem with somebody else,
yeah,
and you're able to speak the same language in terms of we are trying to enhance our DEIE strategies,
right,
working together can only
yeah,
help both of our companies. It's
right,
a good game plan. But
right,
again, be intentional about it, because
yeah,
that will make your partners in the US want to work with you, because you do have a lot of rich diversity that they may not have in-house. So you can complement each other, but also internally continue to work on your own DEI strategy.
yeah. Oh, great. I think,
From a
yeah,
short-term perspective, I think that
yeah,
would be it.
yeah,
Long-term perspective is there's opportunities for them to be able to look at certifications as well,
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of being like so the United States has a lot of national certification where you can be a
yeah,
minority owned business, and
right,
you can be a small woman owned business, a minority owned business. Those certifications are recognized by big companies. That means
yeah,
a third party has vetted out your organization, and yes, you
yes,
do fit those criteria. That
right,
means that any company that wants to do business with you know that
yes,
you've already been vetted and you are a minority owned or you are a woman owned
yeah,
business. That allows them, again, from a supplier diversity aspect, to really
yeah,
want to partner with you then. So I am going with that
yeah,
supplier diversity, because in the US that is a big, big, big opportunity for these companies, and
yes,
anyone that wants to do business in the US
yeah.
can really look at that as an avenue.
Right. I think being strategic, being intentional, I think these are some great takeaways from our conversation today, Sarika. And I'm sure our viewers will love this conversation because DEIE is a huge topic here in India. And I think companies which want to enter either Europe or the US will need to be intentional about it, and they'll need to really be strategic about it. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure our viewers will find it very interesting.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for the opportunity to speak with you, and to your listeners. I look forward to making collective impact globally with you
Right.
and everyone.
Right.
So thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Thank you.